On the 11th of December 2023, the Supreme Court of India unanimously upheld the abrogation of Articles 370 and 35A. The Supreme Court also directed the Union government to restore the statehood of Jammu and Kashmir and hold legislative assembly elections no later than September 2024. Today, the Jammu and Kashmir elections have been declared. It looks like an NC-INC alliance government after almost 15 years. Now, J&K ceased to be a state after Article 370 was abrogated in 2019. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, while campaigning during these elections, had said, "We had promised in the parliament that J&K will be a state again." Now, after the NC-INC has swept these elections, it looks like the NC's Omar Abdullah is set to return as state chief minister. But for all practical purposes, as things stand today, Jammu and Kashmir is a bit like Delhi NCR and Puducherry, a union territory with an elected legislature. What are the next steps towards its statehood, and why statehood for Jammu and Kashmir is important? Joining me to discuss this are Meeta Chakravarti, spokesperson of the INC, Danish Iqbal, political analyst and former spokesperson of the JKNC, Bhanuchandar Nagarajan, political advisor and political analyst. And in the studio I have with me my senior colleague, editor News9 Mediaverse, Rakesh Kar. Rakeshji, I want to start by asking you this. Was the verdict a surprise to you?
Well, I think, thank you, Sandeep, for calling me into the studio. I have 3 or 4 key takeaways from this verdict. It is on expected lines in my own calculation. So it's fair to call it a NC verdict.
Yes.
You know, INC is essentially a tail in the game. And I have for all couple of decades been pleading that a regional party must govern J&K.
Right.
And, you know, this alliance with the centrist party, whether it is BJP or Congress, doesn't truly, help the state fully meet its aspirations. So point number 1, with NC in the driver's seat, I'm happy that the people of the state, especially in the valley, would feel completely, in line and sync with this verdict.
Right.
Number 1. Number 2, the verdict in J&K is on expected lines because the Jammu profile, by and large, stays with BJP.
Right.
Congress has failed to make an impression in J&K. I felt it would do even better in Jammu. So, it's an NC story and a BJP story. Third most important part to my mind is that mainstreaming of separatist parties, erstwhile, also is a big win for Indian democracy.
Right.
So they may not have won the election, but we've sent out a very strong message after a decade of militancy being at peak and then coming down slowly after Article 370 abrogation. They're coming into the electoral foray, to my mind, is a very big strength area.
Right. Mainstreaming,
yeah. I mean, they may not have won, but I think we a step closer to them being in the national fray. PDP versus NC. Now that's the other big debate.
Yes.
To my mind, PDP represents a darker shade of mainstream, yet separate, supporting separatists.
Right.
In that sense, NC, especially with Umar in the command, has been a minister in the NDA government when Vajpayee was the prime minister. So I think there is going to be some happy tiding between the BJP at the center and NC in the state.
Right.
And
absolutely.
Lastly, I would have loved that Congress wins some seats in in Jammu and BJP wins some seats in Srinagar, because that is the true emblem or marker of state being fully integrated.
But that hasn't quite happened.
That hasn't. So I'm saying that's a bit of a setback.
Yes.
NC being in the driver's seat is a good plus. Congress needs some introspection.
Right.
And BJP also needs to look at why it couldn't do that big ticket number in Jammu and not open an account in Srinagar, which it claims to have done the hard work for all these months and years.
Yes.
And mainstreaming of so-called separatists is also a plus for me in terms of the larger democratic message.
Right, but essentially it's a bit of a deja vu kind of feeling that we have, that you have a very strong regional party in alliance with a central party. As you mentioned, it's back to the INC and NC, or rather the NC-INC combined, which is going to rule the state for another 5 years, it looks like, not 6. But Meeta Chakravarti, now the big question is, statehood for Jammu and Kashmir. That's one political plank almost all parties have campaigned for. We want Jammu and Kashmir the way it was pre-2019. Is there a deadline by which you would like to see this happen, or do you see Jammu and Kashmir being like Delhi, ruled by a very powerful lieutenant governor, or in Puducherry, but more Delhi, where the Union Territory, as we know, is administered by the Home Ministry. So there's, seeds of a potential conflict in the future that the LG's Manoj Sinha, and you have in Delhi, you have the LG VK Saxena. But, tell us how important statehood for Jammu and Kashmir is going to be. Is that going to be the INC's big plank after winning these elections?
First of all, thanks for having me in your show. And I believe that, yes, we are going to give a lot of importance on getting the statehood back, which, by the way, has also been stated by all political parties across the political spectrum. And I think that's going to be a very high priority for Indian National Congress and as well as our alliance partner, NC. And the Delhi example that you took, that model of governance and the constant conflict that we see between Delhi's elected PM and the LG is hardly an ideal example to follow. It has caused a lot of grievances, it has caused a lot of setbacks, and I would sincerely hope that it is not repeated in J&K. So one of our priorities when we form the government will be to get the statehood restored.
Yes.
Now we have to see as how practically and how quickly can that be made possible, because what we would not want to see is an opposition India alliance government in the state having or in the Union Territory right now having a constant conflict with the appointed LG.
Absolutely. So the three scenarios, Meeta, I would like to underline here are that one is a possibility, and I'm just going to mention these three scenarios very quickly. One is, of course, a return to pre-2019 status when Jammu and Kashmir had special status under Article 370. Likelihood of that happening?
Unlikely.
Very unlikely.
Very unlikely. I think, there's going to be a common minimum program, if I can use that phrase, which has been misused quite often, between the center and the, NC-led government in J&K. So I think that is good for peace across the board, rather than revisiting, a pre-2019 situation.
So the pre-2019 scenario is completely ruled out. The second scenario is that it becomes a state like any other Indian state, the 29th state of India, like all the other 28 states. It has a legislature, the law and order, land, all of these are under the control of the state government. That seems to be the most likely scenario. But is there a third scenario, Rakesh ji? Is it possible that you could have a very unique special status again where law and order is not under the control of the state government, as is being speculated, that it is quite possible that given the fragile security situation there with external factors involved, with Pakistan fomenting terrorism on the one hand, that you could look at a special status for Jammu and Kashmir where law and order remains with the Lieutenant Governor, or in this case the Governor, and the state would continue to be run as a normal routine. But that would be very extraordinary.
Well, I mean, I have to go by two statements. One is by Umar Abdullah just before the elections, when he said that I'm not going to take dictation from LG.
Right.
So I think, that's a fair enough indication that he will have his own mind to apply when he sits in the Chief Minister's chair.
Right.
But will LG leave the entire elbow room? I think that's a matter of debate, which is unlikely. But Umar Abdullah, when he was the Chief Minister and militancy, by and large was, so to say, brought down to some level.
Right.
Then it peaked up again.
Yes.
He was heading the Unified Command.
Yes.
So in that sense, we are not looking at J&K from a different prism.
Right.
The Unified Command, which looks at law and order, if I can use that phrase, in a very macro sense, to the extent of defining and detailing, who all will man, say, Lalcho. Where all will be CRPF, BSF deployed, where will be the army deployed inside the city, if that's law and order. One is the external borders. We're not talking about that. You're talking about the law and order in that sense.
Within the state.
So, as I mentioned right in my opening remarks, with Umar in command, I don't see too much friction, because he's prone to, being very mature about, making his demands. And I think there's a fair amount of moderate acceptability with the BJP internally
Yes.
about him as CM versus Mehbooba as CM.
Greater comfort with Omar as Chief Minister.
Yeah, and I would also bring in his father. I mean,
Yes.
he's apparently asked his father to come in as the CM,
Right.
whereas the party wants the younger one to be the CM.
Yes.
I think a very happy situation, to answer your question in
Yes.
brief, is Umar deals directly with New Delhi and Amit Shah,
Right.
without the trapping of, unfortunately or fortunately, Congress playing too much on his mind.
Right, absolutely. And it's back to 2009, 2014 as it was
That's
in
right.
his
That's
first
right.
tenure as
That's
Chief
right.
Minister.
Yeah.
Interesting times ahead, but Danish Iqbal, I'd like to bring you on this. Why is statehood so important for Jammu and Kashmir right now? I mean, this is now the elections have been settled. The National Conference is won by a landslide. As Rakeshji was just mentioning, it's back with the Congress. It's the 2009 scenario. Once again, why is statehood so important now for the people of Jammu and Kashmir? Given the fact that law and order has been restored, situation is under control, it's like any other Indian state today.
Well, simply because it allows the elected government to function fully. If you have a truncated power arrangement in Srinagar, even after the people have voted so
Right.
enthusiastically, this wouldn't go well with the voters. And I don't think, in my very humble opinion, that either the powers that be in Delhi or the people in Srinagar
Right.
would like it.
Right.
Statehood is important. Statehood grants you the powers over the law and order, over the administration, over the central services like the IAS and the IPS.
Right.
It allows the chief minister and the cabinet to function. And as somebody who has seen Kashmir, Srinagar, the security panning out over the last 10 to 15 years, you all have to understand that security is a tool in the political management when it comes to Kashmir. It might be quite different in the rest of the country, but its security is very important
Yes.
component in the overall management of politics. And apart from these nitty-gritties of administrative hiccups, why it is so important to restore the statehood now is because that the country, our country, the great country
Yes.
of India, has actually, and I would like to give the credit to the Honorable Prime Minister, has actually given the mainstream politics in Kashmir a resurrection,
Right.
has given mainstream politician a social sanctity. You did not have the social sanctity earlier with the
Right.
elections, with the victories.
Yes.
I'm right now at my home in Srinagar,
Right.
and I'm listening on the roads. There's so much noise and so much happiness
Yes.
that elections have, that the results have come, and
Right.
it has probably come in a good way.
Right.
So you didn't see, you didn't really see it earlier. For me, it doesn't really matter that who
Yes.
wins the election, who doesn't. But what I am really focused at is that the social sanctity
Yes.
that wasn't there has now been granted to elections, and it would be, I repeat and I reiterate, it would be an historical blunder
Right.
if you do not return the statehood to this overwhelming mandate that the people
Yes.
have given. the National
Absolutely. Yes,
Conference.
yes, Danish. Absolutely. Well stated there. The fact that the people of Jammu and Kashmir have reposed their faith in India's democracy, in the democratic process. They've come out in large numbers. They've voted for their parties of their choice. And it's really important for that choice to be honored now with statehood. Bhanuchandra Nagarajan, Home Minister Amit Shah said recently that at a rally on the 7th of September that we have said that at an appropriate time after the election, we will give statehood to Jammu and Kashmir. He said that in Parliament as well. There seems to be no timetable laid out. It's left to the centre to decide when to give statehood to Jammu and Kashmir. You see that happening sooner rather than later?
I think the victory of the Jammu Kashmir election process happened on the day of elections when 65%
Yes.
of the electorate came out and voted, and that's a historic number. And also, like one of the previous speakers said, many of the separatists, people who are outside the political process, came in, and I think
Yes.
that is something that we should all celebrate. And NC has won, so kudos to them as well. So I think, this is step number one. In fact, I would say step 0. So step number one is
Right.
the democratic process started, the elections have happened, now there is going to be a government. Okay.
Yes.
And the return to statehood per se will actually take its time. There'll be political toing and throwing, and
Right.
there'll be jousting and all. That is one aspect. I think now Jammu and Kashmir should actually focus on development, on infrastructure, developing its tourism, like any other state,
Yes.
right? And India is going to be the third largest economy in the world sooner than later. I think
Yeah.
Jammu and Kashmir government and the young, especially the youth of the state, should jump into the process, take advantage of the opportunities, and move ahead. I think that will give another pedestal to actually make a stronger claim for the statehood to be restored faster. So I think we should just not focus on one issue. I think the development process is something that we should focus on. I think the government should be, its feet should be held to fire on what it does on development.
What it does on development, indeed. But Rakeshji, over to you. This demand for statehood. I mean, the fact that the people of Jammu and Kashmir have voted in these very large numbers, as our panelists have pointed out, and it's now you have a government in place. That statehood is going to be the next big demand of the people, all the political parties. Do you see this happening in a reasonable time frame?
I would imagine that's the right word to use. It should happen in a reasonable time.
Right.
And the onus to do should be from the center, not from the state.
Yes.
See, Omar Abdullah should feel truly blessed and privileged, and
Yes.
India should feel very happy that he's inheriting a democratically elected environment
Yes.
when the peace quotient is extremely high.
Right.
This election is a vote for peace.
Yes.
It is a vote for stability. It's a vote for development. And I'm particularly very happy because it's a vote for a regional party.
Yes.
And that party, which among all other regional parties, has a very strong connect with the center.
Right.
So Omar needs to thank New Delhi for getting over a state which is in a best of its law and order kind of an environment.
Yes.
So I don't think he'll jump the ship and start asking for statehood and make it a political issue.
Right.
The trust factor in delivering elections and statehood should sustain, and I'm happy Congress, BJP, NC, PDP, they
Right.
all have voted for this.
They've all voted on this.
And
Yes. Yeah.
most importantly, I want to also bring in, the LG
Yes.
is no stranger to politics.
Yes.
He is he's a Hindi heartland strongman politician who was once considered to be a likely candidate for the Chief Minister of Uttar
Right.
Pradesh.
Yes.
So if both act in trust and faith and in tandem
Yes.
between Umar, because at a very young age he showed deep amount of maturity, being the MOS, for MEA,
Yes.
when Vajpayee brought him in,
Right.
and now so many years have passed, he's seen chief ministership, he's
Right.
seen the turbulence after that,
Yes.
he's seen peak of militancy, he's seen now the center bringing in Article 370 and the law and order returns of that. Someone
Right.
might say that politically it has, so to say, diminished the people of the state.
Yes.
But I don't think this verdict and this voting percentage
Yes.
is a fair testimony to that democracy not
Right.
only sustains and grows in India,
Yes.
it's a big verdict to the world at large that J&K is an integral part of this country.
Right.
And people there have voted for India and have invested tremendous faith in this country.
Absolutely, that's an important point there, Rakeshji made that this is the one election that the entire world watches very carefully. Elections in Jammu and Kashmir, there's no other state election that has an international, quotient as Jammu and Kashmir does, and I'm sure that people would have been watching very carefully the foreign nations. All this propaganda about law and order, security, peace process, democracy, all that the people have voted.
There was a massive delegation of foreign diplomats
Yes.
who went and witnessed election
Right,
firsthand.
absolutely.
What better proof than this subterfuge and propaganda unleashed across the borders?
Yes.
Which is absolutely based on lies and lies and lies.
Lies and lies and lies, but the truth has emerged victorious. And as our panelists have just told us that this is the victory of democracy, it's the triumph of India's political process. But thanks very much for putting that in perspective. I'd like to thank Danish Beg, Meeta Chakravarti, Bhanuchandra Nagarajan, and of course my senior colleague in the studio here, Rakesh Kar, for talking about the next steps in Jammu and Kashmir's return to normalcy, which is the restoration of statehood. That's mission statehood for Jammu and Kashmir. In June 2022, Israel conducted one of its largest military exercise in decades. Now, this exercise was called Chariots of Fire. It involved hundreds of aircrafts, warships, and submarines. Now, these exercises were conducted over the Mediterranean Sea near Cyprus, and the drills included long-range flight, aerial refueling, and striking distant targets. Cyprus was used as a stand-in for Lebanon as the Israeli warplanes simulated attacking Hezbollah, its arch-enemy. Now we are seeing that phase of chariots of fire play out in Lebanon even as we speak. But the exercises in 2022 had another component, where waves of Israeli jets simulated an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. Now, the drill included what we just mentioned: long-range flight, aerial refueling, and striking distant targets, which Israeli jets would have to undertake to strike at targets in Iran located over 1,000 kilometers away. Now, the jets were refueled twice during this simulation. They circled Cyprus, they conducted mock airstrikes, and this drill would simulate a wide-scale strike against Iran, including what is believed its nuclear facilities. Now, Israel has been here before. In 1981, it launched an airstrike against Iraq's nuclear reactor, Osirak. In 2006, it's believed to have sabotaged Iran's nuclear program with the Stuxnet virus. And in 2007, it destroyed a Syrian nuclear reactor. For Israel, an Islamic State with a nuclear weapon would be a threat to its existence. It has no option but to strike first. And today, as the clamor grows within Israel for a strike against Iran, the target is being talked about is Iran's crown jewels, Iran's nuclear weapons programs. And the question we're asking today are, can Israel carry out a strike against Iran's nuclear facilities without the help of the United States? What kind of munitions would they need to carry out such a strike against Iran's nuclear facilities? Would such a strike be limited, or would it be a full-scale strike package against all Iranian nuclear facilities? And then what would be Iran's response to such an Israeli strike? And finally, will such an attack on Iran's nuclear weapons facilities, its reactors, its enrichment program, will it trigger off a wider conflict in the region? Joining me to discuss this today are Itai Melchior, former executive of Israel's National Security Council, and Air Marshal Deeptendra Chaudhary. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus show. Air Marshal Chaudhary, a happy Air Force Day to you, 92 years and counting.
Thank you very much, Sandeep. I mean, it's absolutely a pleasure to be with you on this day.
Right. And Itai, I must say that, while we are celebrating Air Force Day here, we're looking to the west, where the Israeli Air Force is undertaking some unprecedented combat missions. We saw what they did with Hezbollah. We're still unpacking the targeting, the air-to-ground targeting, the level of, striking deep underground targets and eliminating leadership. All of this, these are scenarios that the Indian Air Force would certainly be looking at very closely, because this is what they would be expected to do in wartime. But the big question everyone's asking is, will Israel now use Iran's unprovoked attack on it using ballistic missiles as a chance to strike at Iran's nuclear weapons program? How likely is this?
Certainly, red lines have a history of being stepped over and not always enforced.
Right.
That said, yes, this is an existential issue. By the way, not only for Israel.
Yes.
Israel is not the only a bad country in Iran's eyes.
Right.
Many Western countries are in danger. Moderate Sunni countries are in danger, and also your viewers. A good friend today of Iran is Pakistan.
Yes.
And if Iran has nuclear weapons, the day until Pakistan also has it is very short. So it's a world problem. Sadly, the world is complacent and
Yes.
has always been happy to shy away from red lines, as we just said, and have someone else deal with the problem. And,
Right.
and then the big police of the world, the US,
Yes.
has shown some lack of interest in dealing with the issue until we've gotten to where it is today. You failed to mention that throughout all the
Right.
years that you mentioned, all the big operations,
Yes.
smaller operations have allegedly taken place against scientists, against sites.
Right.
And so a lot has happened, but yes, the goal should be, and this should be the UN goal and the world goal should be
Yes.
to eliminate and stop this Rouge nuclear program in Iran.
Right, absolutely. Very, succinctly put, Itai, the fact that Israel is willing to go where the rest of the world isn't, which is to denuclearize its enemies, stop them short of acquiring nuclear weapons, which would be a threat to its existence. Air Marshal Chaudhary, do you see Israel doing this without US assistance? It's done so in the past, in 1981, when it struck at Osirak in Iraq. It's done so in 2006 and 7. But those were operations where the United States is believed to have been on the same page as Israel. But today, when you're looking at 2024, where the US is publicly telling Israel, do not strike at the energy facilities, do not strike at the nuclear reactors, take your win, do a proportionate strike. Do you see Israel as stepping back, listening to the US, or going and taking this one opportunity they have to completely denuclearize Iran?
Absolutely right. Israel has a history of having done this before, and it is most certainly something which is expected, because if you remember, one considers the fact that the Israeli Air Force has been always in the forefront of its military strategy.
Yes.
And in this case, this is something which it has been for a long time gaming and training for, possibly for,
Right.
as like you mentioned yourself. And only thing is, there are it's not just one target to be hit. There are a fair number of facilities in Iran, which are scattered
Yes.
mostly in the central Iran and a little bit on the coast. I think there are about 5 or 7 odd nuclear facilities and 2 reactors.
Right.
But so if it were to strike all of them, it would need an enormously coordinated operation with a huge number
Right.
of assets,
Yes.
and which will need enormous planning. And most importantly, given the long distances, it will need a lot of strategic routing,
Right.
a lot of masking of intent, of sort of as a cover, covert and divergent operations, sort of deceive and decoy.
Right.
And a huge amount of don't forget that Iran has a reasonable air defense capability. While its Air
Yes.
Force is probably not something which the Israeli Air Force takes possibly too seriously, but it
Yes.
certainly has a potent air defense capability. But Israel is a nation which has shown again and again that it has the capability to, and it most certainly has a will
Yes.
to carry out this attack. Whether it will take the US's active involvement right now, given tenuous situation of the US presidential elections,
Yes.
the timing possibly is something which Israel has most certainly taken into consideration. But given the push to shove, Israel is a nation which probably can and will go it alone if it feels pushed to do so. And don't
Right.
forget, there's enormous pressure on them. In fact, Naftali Bennett, the erstwhile PM, came out saying that Israel must act now, and it considers Iran an existential threat.
Right.
So this is something which Israel can and possibly could go ahead and do it on its own.
Right. Right. Itai, do you think Israel will go ahead and do it on its own, not wait for a green signal from Washington, given the fact that it has an opportunity now that it's presented itself after several years?
So you have to differentiate between to cripple Iran's nuclear program or to eliminate it.
Right.
I don't believe Israel on its own has the capability of totally destroying. Israel needs very heavy bombs, which the US is not supplying. It also needs to have bomber jets which can do this. Israel has shown it can get to the air defense systems, it can get physically to the places,
Yes.
and therefore it can create a lot of damage. The question is, there are 2 questions. One, does Israel want just to wreak havoc and damage in
Yes.
Iran's nuclear program, or take it out? For that, they need the US assistance.
Yes.
I don't see that happening right now. And on the contrary, and this is the second question, right now the US's main goal is to try and stop Israel. The US would very much like Israel to limit its attack to something more symbolic. Yes, maybe strike one side, not completely destroy it. They don't want Israel to strike oil facilities. They don't want oil
Yes.
prices going up or war happening before
Right.
elections, which are less than a month away. And on the other hand, they don't want Israel, they know Israel cannot, without them, carry out a full strike. So there's a kind of bargaining going on behind the scenes as we speak
Right.
with the US trying all kinds of goodies and promises to Israel
Yes.
to refrain from something very large scale.
Right, right. Absolutely. Itai, I listen to you very closely, Itai, because you're almost like a soothsayer. Whatever you say on our show, it comes true in a matter of days, if not weeks. And I still remember that conversation we had a few months back where you said it was not a question of if, but when Israel would move into Lebanon, as they have indeed in the last couple of days. And that air campaign is ongoing. But Air Marshal Chaudhry, Israeli jets are attacking targets in Lebanon as we speak. They are going after Hezbollah. Do you see them having the kind of strike potential to pull out fighter jets from their ongoing missions in southern Lebanon and diverting them to attack Iran? They are a very potent air force. They're probably one of the top 5 air forces in the world. Do they have the kind of capacity to act on two fronts?
The Israeli Air Force possibly at this moment is under a fair amount of, should I say, pressure, commitment, and continuing its air operations. Played a huge role over Gaza, and now it's sort of entrenched in its operations in Lebanon. But what is most certainly that is a fact that while the Lebanon operations are in continuum,
Yes.
the attack on on any kind of specialist facility, and like as I brought out, while it may not have, it certainly probably won't have the ability to attack all the facilities.
Yes.
But it most certainly could hit on certain key facilities as a show of signal, as a show of political signaling and
Right.
of intent. And such an operation, to my mind, it's something. While it will involve a fair amount of air power and all kind of supportive assets. But it is something which, if it needs to do, it can most certainly do it, and it will not impinge
Right.
on most of its operations. It will most certainly would have identified assets and weapon systems and its support equipment
Right.
for a separate standalone mission, which will not necessarily connected to the entire operations ongoing. It might take a little sort of a tactical break to carry out this operation and come back to it.
Right.
So the options are possibly huge, but as very rightly brought out by the question is,
Yes.
the fears of the likely escalation of a serious strike, which is definitive, which is widespread, is something which I don't think anyone in the world is really keen on at this point in time.
Right, absolutely. And Itai, that was going to be my next question, is that if you even carry out a limited strike against Iran's nuclear facilities or some very critical, facilities critical to their nuclear weapons program, will Iran be again forced to escalate and climb up the escalation ladder, do something as they did a few days back, or have they completely exhausted their options? I mean, Iran doesn't seem to have anything else in its arsenal other than ballistic missiles. They don't seem to hit very many targets, though.
Iran shouldn't be taken lightly, and I don't think they've exhausted their options. Remember that they operate until now mainly through proxies.
Yes.
They can have the proxies step up. Yes, Hezbollah and Hamas have taken severe blows and are finding it hard to hit Israel as they would have loved to, but they still have the Houthis doing 100% what they are told. You have Iranian militias in Iraq and allegedly also in Syria. They have a power, and they have a much larger arsenal of missiles. And by the way, everybody was talking about Iran's nuclear program, but their missile program is not less worrying, and the ranges that they were building missiles for went far and beyond Israel. So this is again worrying for the world.
Yes.
I would like to take your views into two more points that we haven't discussed. One, we are celebrating Air Force Day, but also kudos to intelligence, because while Israeli intelligence maybe was on the losing side on October 7th, we see the precision that the Air Force is striking in southern Lebanon, that intelligence there is very, very deep, and Air Force cannot operate this well without having very good intelligence. So that is one point. Second point, your viewers are looking at the map of India, but if they take a map of southern Lebanon or even of Israel and impose it, see how tiny this is. And one of the big achievements of the Israeli Air Force is operating in such a tiny airspace with so many jets at the same time and with such precision. I think this is maybe, if you want to study more military tactics, this is probably the biggest lesson for air forces around the world to see how these operations have been orchestrated. On one side, the precision in small areas, or in the attack that took out Nasrallah with
Yes.
multiple jets hitting the same place with different kinds of munition, and the long range attacks in Yemen and the likes, which have proven a very long range, far away from home, without using carriers or bases.
Yes.
That is also a big achievement.
Right, absolutely, Itai. But after NTB, I don't think anyone's surprised where the Israeli Air Force can show up next. I think that is the gold standard in long range.
Most of your viewers were not born then at that time, and maybe not even sure how Israel actually flew thousands of miles with a decoy to release hostages that were taken to Entebbe in Uganda.
Yes.
Where Prime Minister's brother actually lost his life
Absolutely.
in that operation.
Colonel Jonathan,
of
yes.
hostages.
Absolutely. That's a gold standard operation, and I think it's possibly one of the first operations of the 20th century, Air Marshal Chaudhry, where the one special force raid actually destroyed Uganda's air force on the ground. 1/3 of the air force, or a number of MiGs were shot up over there. But while we study the Entebbe operation as a gold standard in long-range precision flying in almost half a century ago, what are the lessons, Air Marshal Chaudhry, that the IAF can draw from the IAF? The Indian Air Force can draw from the Israeli Air Force, as Itai was just mentioning, the kind of challenging terrain that they're operating in, not only over the sea, but long-range precision bombing, short-range precision bombing, hitting targets in urban built-up areas, deep penetration attacks where JDAMs are used 30 meters below the ground. A lot for us to learn from the Israeli Air Force.
Interestingly, both IAF and the IAF, the Israeli and the Indian Air Forces, have been, I think both are extremely professional Air Force. The Israeli Air Force has always been an Air Force which, in my younger days, we always looked up. But there is one factor which I would like to bring out. I mean, most certainly there are a lot of tactical lessons which would emerge from these kind of operations. And we also have carried out a similar kind of an operation which we actually penetrated an adversarial air defense system and went out and carried out a strike before even the adversary could react. And this was over Balakot.
Yes.
But there's two critical differences I would like to bring out between the two air forces. One is the issue of scale.
Yes.
I mean, the kind of airspace and the adversaries which we face are, in terms of size and the sheer spread of geography, is huge compared to Israel. And there's one huge stark difference, is that the Indian Air Force has potent adversarial air forces across.
Yes.
Whereas Israel has been blessed with the fact that most of its operations in the recent time have been against countries which really don't have potent air forces.
Right.
And while it has certainly shown its prowess in the Arab-Israeli war, I mean, it decimated the Arab air forces and the huge number of aircraft is shot down. But there are a whole lot of lessons in modern-day warfare where one carries out clinical surgical attacks, with minimal of collateral to hit your target systems, and that needs a whole lot of technological supporting systems. And like I probably got out that it needs external help. I mean, Israel would need a whole lot of ISR and intelligence and accurate target data. But given the fact that the kind of threat Israel has always been facing, it is not something which is suddenly woken up to this issue.
Yes.
Israel has always kept a very close eye, and its intelligence has been always focused on the possible target systems and threats of the future. So it most certainly would have built up enough database and accurate target information well before that.
Absolutely.
But notwithstanding that, in any kind of air power employment today has a huge number of contemporary lessons which will most certainly be applicable to Indian Air Force as well.
Absolutely. A lot of contemporary lessons that the IAF could learn from the Israeli Air Force, which is in operations, in the peak of operations while we are speaking. But that big operation is a few days away, we think. That is whether Israel attacks Iran and what targets it will choose. That's a story that we'll be tracking very closely. Thank you very much, Itai Melchior and Air Marshal Chaudhry, for joining us, discussing this possibility of Israel striking back at Iran and what targets they choose.